maybe the first part of you that has to move is your mind.
Katie's so good about talking about everything from our shoes to our physical spaces that keep us stuck, but our mental spaces keep us stuck too. If you feel like you don't have enough time, then it's best to slow down and use your time in a meaningful way.
I'm stuck on my screen. I struggle with tech addiction. Let's talk about this one. What can people do to address this?
Yes, it's all new, but it's also not new. We've known addiction for a long time.
Katie Bowman is a biomechanist, best-selling author, and founder of Nutritious Movement. She's a world-leading expert in the importance of a diverse movement diet. Dr. Diana Hill is a clinical psychologist, international trainer, and world-renowned expert in psychological flexibility, helping people to create fulfilling and impactful lives. So good to see you both. Thank you for coming to hang out with us.
Thanks for having us.
Traveling through the rain, literally walking through the rain.
It's on brand.
Just to get here, right.
It's on brand.
Walking your talk, literally. So one of the things I want to ask you about is you're pointing to we're existing in a perfect storm of sedentary behavior. You know, the way that we really evolved as a species, movement was required to survive. And we've automated so many things. But also we're kind of hardwired to not expend a lot of energy. And so like these two things are meeting together and we don't know why we struggle to move, but you're kind of taking some of the pressure off and the guilt by pointing to like, this is a systemic culture-wide issue that we're struggling with. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think it's really helpful for people to know that there's like a capacity to your willpower muscle, so to speak. And we're really trying to lean on this idea of willpower when maybe there's some changes that you can make to your environment a little bit that won't make you have to muster action all of the time. It can kind of make it where action is happening without you having to muscle through it as much.
Yeah, so it's both, right? So our environments are increasingly encouraging us to move less. I mean, 5 years ago, I was reaching up and pulling the back of my car down, and now I'm reaching up and using my big finger, you know, to push the thing. And we don't notice it. It's just easier. Yeah. And the psychology behind that is that, yes, it is. We always want to do what's easier, right? We want to preserve our energy, but there's more to it than that because there's also cultural influences in terms of messaging that we've been fed around movement, and especially messaging around what constitutes exercise. So I'm from the Jane Fonda little bodysuit with the stripes generation, where we did our 30 minutes of exercise and then we checked the box. And many of us have those outdated rules in our own head about what constitutes as exercise, and we keep on believing them. We're inflexible with those rules, and that's the human mind too. It tends to be quite inflexible. And then there's a lot of emotional stuff that's going on around our movement, right? So we don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want to stand out. Maybe we've had bad experiences as kids around movement. I mean, a lot of us have shame experiences. So these kind of like, it's like a polypharmacy of things that contribute to us getting really stuck and not moving. And what Katie and I tried to do is unpack that and look at it from both environmental, but also a psychological perspective.
That's what I love about it, you know, because you're looking at so much about what we do, especially when it comes to exercise and movement. It's driven by our thoughts. It's driven by our beliefs, you know, our psychology behind it. And so you're actually addressing the root cause or the root struggle versus like, you know, the symptom, like park further away, you know, and just walk, right? And you're talking about why it works and how it works. Can you talk a little bit more about how movement has been pulled out of our daily lives? Like, what are some of the things that we used to do to move and get these movement inputs that we're not doing now?
Well, I mean, we walked here, and it wasn't even a long walk, but I think that a lot of people won't take that half mile or mile walk. It's so easy to jump into a car to be able to go everywhere. And then it's also really easy to stay in your car now. Like we have drive-throughs, you know, first it used to be coffee, and that's banking. There's a lot of schools that don't allow you to get out of your car when you're picking up your kids. You have to stay in the car, in the line, you know, so the kid can get into the car. So like things like walking to and from school, just walking for transportation have kind of dwindled. And as Diana was saying, so many things like rolling a window up and down closing a van door. I always talk about the key fob. I mean, even just the simple rotation of your wrist to get rid of sort of these mechanical ways of operating for a more digital version. And then, of course, like the phone, I think the phone can be a movement disruptor in a couple ways. One, it's so enticing that you will just sit and not move while you're on it. So, instead of going to the movies, which I think we all learned during COVID time, like just leaving your house is a certain amount of movement. Even if you're going to go someplace else to sit at work, getting up and getting dressed was, 1,000 steps by the time you were all done. And so the more you get from something so small in a single place, the less you're going to move. And then also, you can bring things now to you. That same technology that can entertain you in place can also have things delivered to you. I mean, you can even shop for a house. You can shop for a mate, really kind of by just swiping. It's the same van closing finger press is also bring your food right to you, bring a date right to you. And it's just a finger jab. It's a poke, and that's everything can be reduced to a digit motion. That's kind of a pretty big reduction.
My jaw was just hanging open because I didn't think about even finding a mate. Like you don't have to necessarily go somewhere and like be involved and be in an environment. And the same thing with finding a home. And, a big part of human movement was for the procurement of food. Yeah. Right. And now, like literally, you can get just about anything you can imagine delivered right to your door. And we're, again, hardwired to conserve energy because we needed to do that as a species to survive. And so you match those things together and we run into this situation we're in where exercise is now kind of relegated to, we have to do this as a supplement, right? And so with this being said, pretty much everybody knows that, I need to exercise, but it's a superficial thing. But there's a lot of reasons why we find ourselves struggling to do it in our modern environment. And you guys are addressing 44 of these reasons in the book, looking at the psychology behind it, but also solutions. And so we're going to get into some of these specific reasons, and I think they're going to resonate with a lot of people. But I would love to talk a little bit about fitness psychology and concepts like being psychologically flexible. Why are these important going into this?
Well, psychological flexibility, I think, is probably the most important skill that we can have beyond fitness psychology, just in general. And then you can slap it onto pretty much anything. Psychological flexibility in your marriage, psychological flexibility in parenting, psychological flexibility in our careers. And what it is it's your capacity to stay open, engaged, and present, and flexible as you pursue things that matter to you. So if it matters to you, I'm talking about the car drop off. A while back, I just decided I am going to be the one parent that parks the car and looks like a moron and walks in to go get my kid. And why would I want to do that? Sure, I'm getting more steps in, but it has more to it than that. It has greeting my kid face to face instead of my kid getting in the back seat. And we just continue on the way. It has seeing the other families that are coming to pick up. It's just a little bit of waiting time. I'd rather wait standing outside on the grass, right? So it connected to some of my values. And when you identify what your values are and you start wanting to pursue them, which is central to psychological flexibility, what you will find is there's all sorts of obstacles in the way. There's your thoughts, there's your feelings, there's uncomfortable physical sensations, there's your identities, like I'm this, I'm not that, I'm a runner, I'm not a runner, all the things. And with fitness psychology, we have to look at how to overcome those obstacles so that we can be the type of mover, lifelong mover we want to be. There's a lot of research. I mean, this psychological flexibility has, it's part of a ACT, acceptance of commitment, training or therapy. And there's over 1,000 randomized controlled trials on it. It's used with Olympic athletes. It's used in a lot of different settings. But that term itself is probably one of the most helpful things that we can develop.
Right. Just being introduced to most of our lives, we're not aware of the things that we're doing, the decisions that we're making. I resonate so much with that getting out of the car, and I never thought about it before. And my wife would kind of talk shit about it, because whenever I would pick up my son versus when she just gets into the car line, but I would always get out and walk in. But in my mind, it was being more efficient rather than sitting in the car line. I'm just going to get out and go get him. but there's all these other inputs that I'm attracted to, that I value, right? Being able to be seen on campus, right? Like this parent is around, right? Also, being able to see what he's doing, you know what I mean? Just get a little quick peek, you know, what's going on, who is he hanging out with, what's he doing? And being able to speak to people and, you know, of course, like just getting out of the car and stretching my bones and all that kind of stuff. But it was like such a loaded thing, and it's such a simple act for me, you know, from my perspective. And this involves, and to say that psychological flexibility is the most important, and it makes more sense to me now, because that translates into so many areas of our lives, because life is absolutely going to come at you in all kinds of different ways. And the ability to be flexible, I think, is going to be an ability for us to have more resilience, to sustain a certain temperament and positive disposition to keep going forward. I think a lot is going to come along with that.
So there was a meta-analysis that was done with over 55,000 studies looking at, this was Steve Hayes. He looked at pretty much all the research that he could possibly find on why people change. So therapy interventions, every type of intervention you can think of, CBT and interpersonal therapy and DBT. So these different types of interventions. What is it that causes them to change when they actually are successful at change? What are the mechanisms of action? And he found that psychological flexibility accounted for, over and above social support, all sorts of things, about 50% of people's change. It's because when we can be more cognitively flexible, when we can be with difficult feelings, and we can keep our eye on the prize of the why behind why we want to change, then we'll be more successful at it. And there's lots of different ways to do it. So in the book, Katie and I are tackling psychological flexibility in all sorts of ways. Katie does it with her nutritious movement. I mean, she was already doing it before we had a name for it, but it's probably the best predictor of change in psychology research.
Powerful, powerful. Well, this leads into getting into some of these reasons. And I did a mini poll to kind of get a beat on in this community who, you know, a lot of people listening are already interested at least, or dedicated in some capacity to movement and to exercise and to being better. And yet even the best of us struggle at different times. And I found that a lot of these different reasons, we tend to have a lot of them together, sometimes all at once and then sometimes at different times. And so I'd love to go through some of these reasons. Again, there's 44. And so I know every person is going to be able to identify themselves in this book and like that thing that holds them back, you know? And so I want to start, we're going to jump around a little bit. We're going to be psychologically flexible. And I want to ask you guys about reason number 8. And again, we're talking about the reasons. The title of the book is I Know I Should Exercise, But, and there's 44 reasons why we don't move and how to get over them. And reason number 8 is, in this category, you have certain broad categories and you dig in. But the broad category is I don't have enough time. And I know a lot of people can identify with that one right now. But specifically, I have too much work and too many family responsibilities. So how do we address this very common feeling that I don't have enough time? Work, family, it's just taking up my time. I just don't have the time to exercise.
I think we should start by talking about time affluence, because I think that's blows people's minds. You want to?
Well, time affluence is your perception of how much time you have. So there's the reality of the 24 hours we have in a day, but then there's our perception of time. And we've all had an experience of time going really quickly, right? Or time slowing way down, like when you're waiting for your prescription at CVS, right? It's like, this is taking forever.
DMV.
Right. Or the DMV, right? The DMV. And what the research on time affluence shows is that when we do meaningful activities, we feel like we have more time. When we're more generous, there's actually research on that. When we give more, we feel like we have more time. And when we are moving our bodies. So Cassie Holmes, who's at UCLA, she prescribes it to her students to exercise 30 minutes a day if you feel like you don't have enough time. And people will, it depends, you need to do it meaningfully, right? If you are engaging in a walk, as we were walking over here, we were late. We were actually 5 minutes late to this interview. And we chose to walk. And I will probably remember that walk more than I will remember the 2-hour drive I took to get here. And it was probably a 10-minute walk, right? It was a more meaningful experience, actually kind of extended my time. Whereas the 2-hour driving just kind of, I won't remember that 20 years from now. I'll remember walking with Katie. That has a big impact on our perception of time. So given that, if you feel like you don't have enough time, then it's best to slow down and use your time in a meaningful way. And you may actually end up feeling that you have more time, especially if you're moving in ways that are values aligned.
So then let's talk about, is our family keeping us from moving, or is our occupation keeping us from moving? So the way that I like to work on psychological flexibility is, what are some ways you can move within that domain of your occupation and within that domain of parenting time? So we'll just keep going with the picking up your kids example. Like, what if you parked a little bit farther away and actually walked your kid back to your car? So now you're accomplishing that task of picking up your kid. You know, you're going to have to debrief with the kid at some point in the day. Talk about, like, is there homework that needs to be done? You've got practice that we got to go. You know, you kind of do these discussions. And a lot of times you're trying to do it when they're doing something else. You're both doing something else and it's more hurried and maybe everyone's not paying attention. But if you can pair it with that pickup, then you're accomplishing multiple things at the same time. It's something that I call stacking your life, where you're adding a layer of movement in. You're moving your bodies because you're getting back to your car, but you're also accomplishing other more or less enjoyable parenting tasks that still need to be done. And in that way, you are adding movement into your day. So that requires flexibility in a couple ways. One, that maybe you have to shift around your schedule a little bit, where I only have 20 minutes to pick you up because then we got to get home and then we got to do this and then we'll discuss later on. Maybe you figure out how to adjust that time that you were going to spend after you were done picking up and extend the period of time in which you have to do pickup, giving yourself an extra 20 minutes for that period of time, knowing that you won't need time later on. You also have to be flexible, where maybe you were thinking you needed your exercise to look a certain way that day. I have to do this type of exercise, and you weren't going to count a 40-minute walk or a 20-minute walk with your kid towards the kind of exercise. So that's the way I like to apply this idea of flexibility, is you're going to have to shift some mindset a little bit. And you can do that same thing for work as well.
Does this tie in with the either or mentality when it comes to, I don't have enough time?
We have either or, both, and so what was what Katie and I came to at the end of this, that we have these thoughts that are quite rigid, right? So either I go to the gym or I'm not going to exercise today, right? And there's a way in which our mind just wants to make things dichotomous. It doesn't like the ambiguity of holding a paradox. And most things are paradoxical. They're not dichotomous. Most things are a both and situation, right? So even just, for example, walking over here with Katie, we were a little bit late. My mind could say either we should drive or be on time, or we should walk, right? We can both walk and be a little bit late and do Shawn's podcast. And then we add on and so what if we're late? What's going to happen? What's more important to us? That's where the so what comes in, because we get tripped up in our mind by believing the rule, the either or rule. And if we add the so what, and you actually just land on, and that was Katie's edition, the so what, if we land on the so what with so many things, we realize that, wow, I'm keeping myself in a box. And I didn't even know that box was there until I added a so what, right? I'm late for my exercise class. So what? What happens if you walk in a little bit late? If or if I have to leave a little early, or so what if I haven't done this before and I'm new to it and I look a little bit like I'm new to it? What I find that a lot of folks, when they're trying new things, they feel so embarrassed about trying new things, but most people experience them not as embarrassing. They're like, wow, you're trying a new thing. It's actually quite motivating for those of us that are watching you as a beginner, trying something new.
I also just want to circle back. I love the awareness of time affluence,
Mm-hmm.
because all of us can identify with time moving faster or moving slower. And funny enough, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because it seems like my days have been zipping past recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally just stopped the other day, and I actually went and took a break and went for a walk. And I'm just like, I literally wrote books, multiple books in the same amount of time that I have right now. And I felt like I had so much time writing these books. And it's just the structure of my life is different right now. And I'm doing a lot of different items. And so it has me feeling like time is moving faster. But in actuality, it's just my experience of time right now. And I can change that just with my awareness. And so a lot of us, we use time as our excuse. It's our reason to not move because we don't have it. And it's just shifting around, not literally per se, like physically shifting around things, but like making a shift mentally, having more psychological flexibility with our perspective about time is what I'm hearing is going to help us to reveal that time that already exists.
Yeah, you could try out the both and with that. I don't have enough time, and what are you going to do even if you don't have enough time? Because none of us feel like we have enough time. The thing about time, what's interesting about time is that things are being added to our task list as we're checking them off. So if you're trying to get through your task list, it's going to be a never-ending carousel of things coming on. And the faster you go, the less time you will feel. I don't think you're alone in that, Shawn. I think a lot of us are experiencing that because there is a speed up of everything because we're getting used to things being faster, right? So there's a little bit of, you have to be a little counterculture to go slow when everything is going so fast. But you may experience life differently that way. You may see more things. You see more things when you're walking somewhere than when you're driving somewhere. Right?
Got a little Neo in you.
There is no spoon.
Oh, I say that all the time. I say it all the time.
Because, we're
connected.
We're connected.
All right. In the same vein of I don't have enough time, another reason we give is that I'm burned out.
I feel that. Yeah. It's really, I want to talk about movement so much all the time, not just the psychology, but I think intentionally we're burnt out. We can look at all this. Certainly there's people who are physically burnt out. They've been physical all day long. So setting that aside, many of us who feel too physically tired to do exercise are attentionally fatigued. Or, you've focused so intently on what you're doing. And also because we're doing so many things, you're switching between what you're doing all the time. And so I think there's literal time being lost. Every time you switch tasks, and that's kind of Cal Newport's work.
Switching costs.
Yeah, that cost of switching tasks. So multitasking, there's a liability to it in terms of, one, how fast it feels that it goes by, but also there's kind of wasted time if you're not maybe organizing what you're going to do in a way that allows you to stay kind of in a more of a flow state. So when we're burnt out, I'll just talk to the movement motivation. It's really hard to be motivated to move because you feel so physically spent, but you can, logically see that you haven't spent yourself physically, but the way you feel is markedly the same as being physically exhausted. So in that case, when people are burnt out, I like to suggest things like, what's a way of moving that feels low energy to you that you could start with? Maybe it's also either or. If you're like, I have to go to the gym for exercise, that feels so high energy when you feel so low energy, maybe picking something that's more of a low energy version. Like, I'm just going to get on the floor and do some stretches here for a second, or I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm not going to get myself to the gym or whatever else you imagine doing, but I'm just going to go take an easygoing walk. And what happens is you can do sort of light, very light to light activity, and it gives you energy. And it's one of those paradoxes where it feels like it can only take more, but it's opposite. It's pretty revitalizing. And then once you're on that trajectory of having more energy from doing lower maybe intensities of movement. I don't mean physical activity, but picking something that would feel enjoyable to you to do you might find that you have more energy to eventually do that bigger thing, or maybe you're just going to get a lot of lighter activity and you're not going to just sit still and do nothing, because those aren't your only two options.
This reminds me of the concept of, flossing one tooth.
That's
You know what I mean? Like it just like you start the process, you're like, I might as well. But this one I can really identify with from, having a rough year, as we talked about. And, I've gone to the gym less this past year than I have in, 25 years or, something like that. And I love it. I love the gym. The gym loves me. But just all that I was going through and carrying, I just found myself. But what I did was I gave myself permission to just do what feels good. And so I spent a lot of time just going outside and walking. Or I love my rope flow, which I don't know. Do you know about the rope flow? I brought it, just in case, if you were, I knew you would be into it. But just going out in my backyard and just doing some rope flow, or, sometimes I felt like, okay, I'm not going to go to the gym, but I'm just going to go out and do as many pull-ups as I can. I feel like that. Let me go grab this pull-up bar, so I gave myself permission. And am I the fittest I've ever been? No, but I'm still a problem. All right. I'm still a presence, but I gave myself permission. It was tough because I was being a little hard on myself. I gave myself permission to just do something, and I wanted to be outside. And I want more people to give themselves permission to, especially again, if you're feeling burnt out. So do you have any other input on this?
Well, I think you're alluding to the psychological skill of self-compassion, which is for most of us when we're struggling, we aren't the best inspirational coach to ourselves. If you were to climb inside someone's head and like kind of listen with a voice recorder of what people say to themselves when they're struggling, especially when they're burned out, they blame themselves. And what we know about burnout is that it's actually more a systemic issue than an individual issue. There's plenty of research on that. People are burned out in part because there's too much workload and not enough resources to do the workload, or they're in environments that are toxic, or they're going through a life transition that is just too much to carry for them as an individual to carry, right? And we blame ourselves for it. And then we compare ourselves to when we went to the gym for an hour and a half and how many pull-ups I used to do. And if you were to think about somebody that's struggling and going through all that and tell them, well, you used to do, 15 pull-ups and now you're not doing any pull-ups. All you're doing is walking outside. Do you think that's going to increase or decrease their motivation to get out and walk? So the practice of self-compassion is woven through all of our work. It's an additional practice to psychological flexibility, and it has just as much research as psychological flexibility. And what's interesting about self-compassion is that it's different than pity. It's not pitying yourself. You're encouraging yourself, but you're using a kind tone. You're using like the best parent that you could imagine, or your favorite coach that was like so helpful to you as a kid. You're using that tone. You're using those words, and you are actually encouraging yourself to work hard because you know that it's good for you, but you're adjusting. You're asking what you need, what you enjoy, like Katie was saying. And it sounds like you're already doing that, Shawn. So you naturally, and probably a lot of work, have gotten to that. And that's why you're still moving, even though you've had a hard year. Yeah.
And now, since, again, I've been sharing some stuff on social media. I was kind of hiding out. But since then, the last month, I've been at the gym like all the time, like I feel like myself, and as far as that's concerned. But I didn't want to get back to, and I think that that's another thing I hear a lot, is I want to get back to. And I had this revelation. I don't want to go back. I want to be better. I want to be better, than I've ever been before. And it might be different, right? It might not be, again, like I'm carrying, 30 extra pounds of muscle. It might be, I'm faster or have, better agility than I've ever had, whatever the case might be. And just trying to find the opportunity. And another one of these, by the way, and I know so many people can agree with this or resonate with this one, this was reason 5 in the book. I'm great at starting exercise programs, but I can't seem to stick to them. And I know there's some people that have their antennas going up right now. Like, that's me. Like, I'm great at starting stuff, but, I quote, fall off. Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Well, I think a lot of times we we'll embrace something. Like we'll even reach out for like a 30-day challenge, I'll do something for this fit time, but like it already has an end date on it, and like, so spoiler alert, like you're connecting maybe more to, almost the shortness of it. You're motivated by the shortness of it, the ending of it, without necessarily recognizing that before, like that as you were even getting started, you already see the end in sight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the places that we start with folks is around values.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference between, I think 30-day plans are fun. I can get on that motivation train of all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And there's a little dopamine boost. You feel energized by it. When that goes away, there's some other things that are still there about the reasons why you wanted to do the 30-day plan in the first place. So when you were talking about agility and being a little faster, if you were my client, I wouldn't let you end at that. I'd want to know, why do you want to be a little faster? What is it about that for you? Because your reason for being a little faster at the gym may be different than mine. And there may be, so why do you want to be a little faster?
Oh, I'm getting interviewed. I like it.
Yeah.
A couple of reasons. Just part of it is I love to compete, and like competing, playing mm-hmm. basketball with my son, for example. And now he's really good. Mm-hmm. And so just being able to, and he's very fast, just being able to compete and not, for me, it's not about the competition. It's about giving him a challenge and helping him with things mm-hmm. so that he can be better against other people. So it's like part of it is for my own confidence, but a big part of it is service, and love for my son.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you put those two in front of you, you put, I want to be a little faster, like on a piece of paper in front of you, and I'm going to give you a 30-day plan to be a little faster. Or if you put in front of you, I care about service and being there for my son, which is a bigger motivator for you? I mean, that the service and being there for your son is like, that's going to be there forever, and it could show up in lots of different ways. It could show up by being a little faster so that you can play with him. But when you're 90, he's going to be faster than you. So, at some point he's going to say, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe you'll still, you're taking a lot of precautions, but if you dig into the deeper reason why, like the heart one, that like, oh, that one feels a little bit meatier for you, then it lasts longer than the 30-day plan for you. And if you can bring it up close, you can remind yourself of that. It also can help you overcome all the things that are getting in the way mentally to do that bit of getting a little faster. There's lots of physical discomfort. There's probably thoughts that you have when you're on whatever sprinting that could get in the way. And the values are more sustainable long term. So we do a lot of work around values in the book because it's such an important foundation of psychological flexibility.
And motivation. It's like, what are you motivated by? And I think also we don't recognize that our motivations change over time. What motivated you when you were 30 is going to be different than what motivates you when you're 40, or what motivates you when you're dealing with grief or when you're dealing with injury. So we have to stay flexible mm-hmm. around our movement whys. I think that's really helpful for people who have a hard time sticking with it, is maybe you didn't have a north before you started. So definitely, I have found personally from just working with Diana, knowing my movement whys are really helpful because what did we say recently? Like you're drafting behind them a little bit, and without them, you're sort of swimming around in all these different directions, not necessarily in the direction you wanted. And
it's different than, we see values all over the place. Like every mission statement has values on them. And it's different than like what you would write down and hang up on the break room wall we're talking about. I once did a workshop with a group of CEOs, and I was going in to do this values workshop, and they had their journals with their values printed on them. And they're like, we already have our values printed. I'm not as much interested in that, like the word that you associate with the value. I'm interested in the way it's reflected in your day-to-day life. And do you feel moment to moment clarity around what's most important to you, what your values are, how you want to show up, the verbs and adverbs of how you are being, and where are you in relationship to that? Because every moment's a choice point to either move towards or away. And what's great about that is that there'll be another choice point. So if we had decided to drive here, we would have another choice point to move our bodies. And it it's forever. So that's what's nice about values is they're dynamic, they're changing, they're active.
This ties in really well to, and you kick off the book with this as far as the specific reasons. I don't care that exercise is good for me. I just don't want to do it, and that is, again, some people are going to resonate with that. I just don't care. I don't want to. And part of this was you got me, and I kind of quizzed myself on this, but you mapped out some of the things that, as far as like my disposition and my values, right? And values, this proposition about understanding our values is embedded here throughout the book, because that is that underlying thing. When you mentioned even about my son, if the conditions change, my value is going to help me to be flexible and to change my approach with something to keep on finding a way to be there for him. And so there are a bunch of different things that you guys listed out. One of them was, as far as values, like what do I resonate with? There's like adventure, right? So like embracing opportunities for new experiences. There's collaboration, there's compassion, there's body awareness, nature connection, equity, playfulness, many other options. But I identified my 3 that jumped out.
Yay.
And the first one was compassion, demonstrating empathy and actively working to alleviate suffering in oneself and others. So that value really does, if I'm being honest, because I try to switch it. I try to consciously switch to like, I'm going to love me. Like, this is my era, not my soft era, but like my era, right? But it doesn't motivate me as much as being my best so that I can be there to support and uplift and provide a model for others. And so that compassion is a big driver. Playfulness was another big driver for me, engaging in activities that bring joy, fun, and rejuvenation. I love to play. If I'm just being honest, I like it. And then the last one was integrity, living with honesty and staying true to your principles. That one, yeah, this is like, I have to be this. I have to be this. And so taking my values and consciously putting them into my movement practices and what I'm choosing to do is just like, it unlocks. And it's not an accident that I read this book and then like the last month I've been at the gym more, and I feel like, quote, more like myself. And it's like, this stuff really does work, but it's like being able to have that self-assessment, to go within and to think about these things.
Yeah, we just taught a workshop to help people find their values. Because for me, maybe not for you, because you live in that psychological space, but I'm just a regular person. Like, I'm not a psychological expert. It was hard. I understood the concept of values, but I didn't know what my words were. I needed actually to take the time to identify them. And I think once you do that, it's really helpful to then align them to movement, whether you bring movement to the values or the values to movement, which is an interesting distinction. But yeah, going through that process, and it was interesting to hear everyone bring up and people bringing up values like organization. They would say like, I really value organization, but I can't see how to influence how this influences my movement or how my movement influences this. So to bring up examples like, well, then is movement on your calendar somewhere? You organize your time, or what about space in your home? Can you organize your home in some way where it's supportive of movement? So once you have those words for yourself, it becomes, I think, much easier.
It's a fuel that drives your behavior. So if you really value compassion, you could think about, okay, when I go to the gym, do I come home and am I more compassionate? Does my movement help me be more compassionate? For me, for sure. If I go for a run, I'm a much more compassionate mom than before my run, right? But then the next part of it is, okay, then how could I bring compassion to the gym? Am I lifting in a way that's compassionate? It may be things like, am I wiping down my sweaty spot for the next person that's coming? Or am I making this place an inclusive place where all bodies are welcome at my gym? And that would be a way to bring compassion to the gym. So that's the beautiful thing about movement and values, is that you can, when you were talking about bringing your values to movement or your movement to your values, is that when you start to frame it that way, it's much richer. I mean, that's a richer experience than just going in the gym, clocking in, clocking out.
Yeah. You've mentioned this a couple of times about the environment and being more supportive. And just to circle back, like put a little, period on the sentence of what I went through this past year. And something that really helped me was I had these tools in my environment that were attractive for me at that time. So I had gotten, and this is just an example. This could be as simple as a rope, right? But I had gotten a sled. And so again, I just felt like, let me just go outside and push this sled a little bit. And just, it's kind of like that first domino, right? And the first, flossing the one tooth. I do that, very challenging, but it's like turned stuff on. I was like, I'll go ahead and do some lunges. I'll go ahead and do some Bulgarian split squats. And next thing you know, like I've had an incredible workout. And so what can we do to create an environment where things are attractive? It does not mean that everybody needs to get a sled, but having that rope for the rope flow, the flow rope, and just literally leaving it sitting out though.
Absolutely.
All right. Because I've got a chair and that my wife doesn't necessarily like, right in the living room. And I'll leave it right there versus if it's in the drawer tucked away, I literally don't touch it as much. If I see it and I walk by it, I tend to pick it up like 5-10 times, more likelihood of using it. Absolutely.
Well, you mentioned playfulness. I have teenagers now, and a value that I have is connecting with them, not in a fun way, not in the way that sometimes I have to connect with them. I put a mini rebounder, a little mini trampoline in our living room, right out in the middle of the living room. Your wife would probably also not like our living room, but but everyone's just on it and jumping all the time. We have difficult conversations, going through to-do lists, and everyone's just bouncing away. So that's just a very simple addition. So if play or fun or just physical activity for your family is something that you're trying to do, that's like a simple modification, but absolutely out, where you don't have to have that willpower muscle that we talked about earlier to go find it. Because you want to do some exercise. It's just a casual interaction that launches you.
Which requires psychological flexibility. So sports equipment on my lawn. I've got like a big, net, and then there's like baseballs and there's basketballs and there's shoes everywhere. And it's a mess. And I, as a mom, want it cleaned up. But if I clean it up, then I'm missing out on that opportunity for my kids to, like, just in the morning, they'll walk by, they'll pick up, they'll do a few hits, and then they'll go to get in the car, right? So it's out there and it's ugly. And I'm willing to have it be ugly because I know it's my kids moving, and my kids moving gets priority over the ugliness of my lawn. And, and then people come over, I tell them to clean it up every once in a while, but it's actually people come over and they want to play with it too. Oh, yeah. So, as a psychologist, I'm my office space, a podcast office space. I sit on the floor for my podcast. I'm on a little cushion. So now I'm using my body instead of, leaning back. I have a ball that I sit on. I always offer my clients to go walking. We open in the beginning of a session as therapy. You're just kind of chatting a little bit. We walk down my little lane, we walk back, and then we sit down, or sometimes I do the whole session walking. And it requires us to get out of these confines. I mean, Katie's so good about talking about everything from our shoes to our physical spaces that keep us stuck, but our mental spaces keep us stuck too. So we have to break those rules and be the one that's doing it, and other people will join in, and then they'll feel better. That activation energy, yes, a lot of people talk about evolution and the brain and how we're sedentary, but the brain is also designed to move. And there's also some evolutionarily, if you were moving in the wild, you were moving for a reason. And so your brain gives you feedback, keep moving. If you were running in the wild, you were running for a reason. So your brain fills you up with all sorts of neurohormones that tell you, keep moving, this feels good, this is important, keep doing it. So if you can get over that activation energy with psychological flexibility, then your body will take over and it will reinforce you.
I love this.
You got it.
Now, you didn't know where I was going to go to next, but it's a good transition. I love segues. Okay. Which is being concerned about what other people think. Right. So having your yard look a little different, or your living room. Right. And in all fairness to my wife, by the way, she's letting me do some pretty crazy stuff. Like looking back, like, I can't believe she let me do that. But we used to have a yoga swing in our living room in a smaller house when we first got married. And I found out about this, this thing, and we didn't have anywhere to put it. And so it's in our when people walk in the house and they're just like, people that, they come over, they're like, what are you guys into? Like, this looks crazy, right? But then all these grown ass people want to play on it.
That's right.
But, that piece, but also just like, we need to keep things out of the way. We don't want, to have any kind of intrusive things. Your house is supposed to look a certain way. Your yard is supposed to look a certain way. We've got all these manicured lawns, in our neighborhood. We could be using that space to grow food, like, it's just like but we're doing what is socially acceptable.
Sure.
So,
or not even like what you have, like what you're doing. I go to a lot of sports, a lot of soccer games, and I'm standing around, watching a lot of soccer. I'm like, this would be a really great 90-minute movement session if I can feel comfortable being the only person doing some lunges here right now, or walking around the field and watching from that position as opposed to sitting in a chair or standing. And so I've tried to give myself permission to do that. I'll bring my flow rope and watch. And then I notice that other people start to come over and do it with me, or I'll invite people to do it. And then if you can, be the change, so to speak, it gives permission to a lot of other people to do it as well.
Yeah, it's something as simple as that, which is like at those soccer games, which I've been to a lot, or baseball, they got the most immaculate chairs with the cup holders, freaking,
tents
umbrella,
now for rain,
remote control, whatever, all the snacks are crazy. You know what I mean? And I'm just, standing there, and also, you're dealing with different climates and things like that. It's just, for me, mentally, it's an opportunity. But to lean more into this is one of these reasons. I'm too embarrassed. And this is something that many people are experiencing right now, of, reasons why they're not exercising or going to the gym. And specifically, I want to ask you guys about this. I'm too embarrassed. I'm ashamed of my body. Let's talk about this one.
Well, this is where the so what comes from down the road, but I think that you should probably address some of the psychology first.
Yeah, I almost went to so what first.
Yeah,
but
so what?
That's a dangerous move to go too quickly.
Right,
you don't want to say so what.
No.
But if you can get there, that's great. Certainly, body image is a huge reason why we don't move, and it's this vicious cycle, right? Because what we know about movement is that whatever size you are at, moving your body improves your body image without having to change anything about your body.
That is a fact.
So just a bout of movement will make you feel more embodied. Maybe you relate to your body in a different way. The nature of movement, especially if you have a focus on the function, not just the form, and you start to appreciate, wow, my body, the things it can do, that's another way of relating to our body differently. This is one of those ones that's there are a lot of contextual factors that are contributing to this. And so blaming the individual for their negative body image is ridiculous. So there's just, I have a history of anorexia and bulimia and I used to run a treatment center for eating disorders. And, initially what the treatment approach for some of these eating disorders was to restrict movement, have people not move. And then people that were in larger bodies, force them to move. So it's the same like model of movement as punishment. But if we could start to switch it to movement as the kindest thing that you could do for yourself, and then how could you both find inclusive places where, and there's messaging out there, like things like yoga is very much people don't want to go do it because it's all thin people with lots of mirrors, right? Can you like do a little search and use words like inclusive in your search on Google for gyms or yoga? But we could start online. We can start with friends, and then we slowly expand our zone of flexibility into places where practice a little bit with being embarrassed. I love to tell clients, what happens when you're embarrassed? You start to feel embarrassed, and then your cheeks kind of get a little pink and your heart races, and then it gets really, 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 really embarrassing. And then you have a moment of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die of embarrassment. And no one's ever died of embarrassment. But a lot of people have died of the things that maybe they didn't do, or they die with a lot of regrets about the things that they didn't do. So we all could be more embarrassing. I mean, parents of teenagers, this is just I'm just embarrassing human being
Just
to be
existing.
around, just existing, breathing.
Just existing is
Right.
embarrassing.
So I'm kind of more comfortable with embarrassment as I age. And it's a good thing to get, comfortable with and be part of challenging, that it's really a systemic issue. I mean, body image is a systemic thing, but.
So are there any practical things? So again, like if someone is, they want to exercise, but they're too embarrassed because they don't feel comfortable in their own skin to go to the gym that's, by their house that they've been wanting to go to. Is there anything practical they can do?
Well, I think you would have to identify what it is. Are you embarrassed because you won't know what's going on? Are you embarrassed because we added like jiggle? My body's going to jiggle. So we made a whole list of things to do to start jiggling your body. Like get used to that feeling. Do it in front of a mirror. Maybe you need to normalize some of those feelings or those movements to yourself. It's not even about necessarily other people. It's that you don't feel comfortable first. So getting more comfortable in your own skin, inside your own home. If you're embarrassed because you will be the worst person there, I think that's a big one. I'm going to be the least coordinated person there. Everyone else is big stories, right? About what it's going to be like. How do you step into the gym just a little bit? Go for one class, stay for just a little bit. Take a tour, bring someone with you. These are practical ways. Ask. I mean, I'm a big person. I'm really big on communicating what the problem is. I would love to come to this space, but I'm so nervous because everyone else is I worked in gyms for years, and people would say, everyone else is going to know, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I'll be like, oh, I'll show you. Like, I'll take you around for the first time, and there's compassionate people who work in health and wellness. I think sometimes when you are not in that space often, the feeling is everyone else has already got it together and are extremely judgmental. But it's just people who love fitness and love the gym. And of course they want you to come and have a good time here. So you just need to find those people and maybe be a little vulnerable, say what you're afraid of, and see what comes back and how that can be accommodated.
Yeah, I love that practical solution of peopling, using people, taking advantage of your relationships, because it's pretty automatic that you have more comfort when you're with somebody that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And there's a practice, there's a Buddhist practice called Just Like Me. And in the practice, what you do is you kind of just go down the street and you look at people and you say, just like me, this person's embarrassed about something. Just like me, this person's suffering around something. Just like me, this person's afraid of something. Just like me, this person has something they worry about at night. Everybody is embarrassed of something. And when we see that, that's just sort of this is a practice of self-compassion, the common humanity around embarrassment. It's also a built-in evolutionary, very social emotion. We are embarrassed to keep us in line and part of the group. But if we remember, just like me, they're embarrassed too, then all of a sudden we're part of the group. There's things that they are embarrassed of that are so easy for you. And there's things that you're embarrassed of that are so easy for them. And that's okay, just like me. It's I see self-compassion as probably the key intervention for embarrassment in combination with what Katie's like an armchair psychologist. She should get like the honorary degree in psychology because she already does all of it. But what she was talking about with jiggling is a psychological principle called exposure, which is where you expose yourself to the feared thing. And you start small and then you do gradual exposure and you get better and better and better at being with that feared thing. So start small with your embarrassment, do embarrassing things on purpose. And embarrassment will be part of your repertoire. Parent and teenager. Yeah.
It's like a muscle.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit more about this particular one. I'm too embarrassed. Again, this is one of the subsections. And another one of them really stuck out is I want to go walking with friends, but I'm too out of shape. Right. And so there's this idea that we can have that I want to do the thing, but I need to get good enough first, right? I want to, play basketball with my friends. They get together and play basketball, but I'm not good enough yet. So let me practice, which usually doesn't happen, right? We delay the thing. And same thing, going for a hike. Like I'm not in shape enough to go for this hike with my friends, even though it's just a very casual thing that they do every Sunday. They invited me to, but I want to get good enough first. Let's talk about that one.
I love this question. These are all real submissions from people. And I have a lot of friends of a wide variety of fitness levels, we'll say, just like everyone else, right? Doesn't everyone have a wide range of friends? And so the idea that friend time is always exactly the same as far as, how fast everyone is going, it's like, well, maybe there are friends who go your speed right now, or maybe your friends will go your speed if you just ask them. That's another one of those reaching out to say, and I actually had a friend who sent me this text, like, I would love to get together and move. And she sent a group text to all of her friends, but I have been recovering from this whatever, illness, life situation. So I can't go really fast, but I feel like I could go a few miles or whatever it was, put some parameters around it, and like, boop, 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 messages coming in. I'd love to do that with you. Let me know when. And so I think it's, again, about not keeping everything inside of ourselves and making a lot of assumptions about how everyone else is going to behave or what they're thinking, and just sort of communicating a little bit. You can start with, your close friends, or you could do something a little bit more broad where you're putting up a message on a Facebook page, or in another your school community or your church community, and say, I would love to get better at hiking, but my capacity is this right now. Does anyone have a similar capacity who would like to get together? And leaning on that community. Also so important, I would say, for movement habits is like others.
I love how all of it translates to life, right? Because I want to go walking with my friend, but I'm out of shape could translate to, I want to go to out to dinner with my friend, but I lost my job. I'm embarrassed of that. I don't want, I'm the only one that's not working right now, or I'm the only one that is, not in school, or all the things that we feel like we're different or separate. And what Katie's talking about there is when you acknowledge that and you say it out loud, you get people actually wanting to come towards you. We have lots of drives, human drives. We have the drive, to run away from scary things. And we have the drive to seek out resources. Those are the two prominent ones that are emotion systems that are actually hyperstimulated in our current environment, the threat system and the drive system. But we have a third system, which is our drive to bond, to tend and befriend. So when you go on that walk and you say to your friend, I haven't walked in a long time, I'm kind of out of shape. You're just going to push on their compassion button, and they're naturally going to want to be helpful to you. And then they may share something with you. And then all of a sudden we're going on a walk, but it's about more than the walk. We're actually connecting around some more vulnerable stuff. And then it becomes that meaningful walk, and it's good use of your time. You have time affluence because you're having meaningful connection.
And I think also sometimes you are actually more capable of taking this walk that you perceived as extra hard. But when you get with friends, it's a little easier, right? You're enjoying yourself a little bit more. And another practical thing is you can also just go a little bit. That's the flight. Again, that psychological approach is maybe you don't do the whole hike. Maybe you don't do the whole walk. I'd love to come and join you for the first 20 minutes, and then I'm going to turn back around. That's what I can do right now. Instead of thinking either or, I can either do it with my friends in exactly this way, or I can't do it at all. Like, find a portion of it that you can do.
It's great advice. I want to go one more in this category of I'm too embarrassed, because again, it really, a lot of us feel this a lot. Mm-hmm. And this one is, I keep comparing myself to people in my exercise class, and that comparison. I believe it is a natural human tendency to compare ourselves. And I also know that we can absolutely jump in and take the steering wheel on it. And today, more than ever, it is like hammered into our brains that, and matter of fact, and this is going to be a good segue to the next thing too, but we're exposed to so many things to compare ourselves to, so many people. We used to have like a tribe, maybe according to the data, 100, 150 people we might compare ourselves to in some aspect. Now it's thousands thousands and thousands of people. It's just very abnormal. It's so much pressure for the human brain to handle. But I love the sentiment that comparison is a thief of joy, of course. But how do we handle this? You know, I'm too embarrassed. I'm in that yoga class and I'm comparing myself to other people. And I know I should exercise, but I don't want to because I compare myself.
Well, I wouldn't say comparison's all bad. So there's a swing towards we shouldn't compare ourselves. Stop comparing yourself. Sometimes comparison can be a really useful tool to get yourself moving forward in something, you know, because it can be motivating. But it has that quality of judgment associated with it that it's problematic. So comparison, again, is another one of those evolutionary psychologically beneficial things for the most part, until we add negative judgment. And one of the things that I do so I've been taking yoga for 20 years. I actually dropped out of graduate school and went to a yoga ashram thinking I was going to be a yoga teacher, and then went back to graduate school. And with my own history, reclaiming my relationship with movement was a rough one. Like it was, going back into it, and how do I do it in a way that isn't about being on the Stairmaster looking at the 470 calories burned, or the person next to me that's thinner than me, or whatever than me. So I started practicing and learning about attentional flexibility and the power of attentional flexibility. So you could pay attention to the other person and their form and how they're looking, and compare it with negative judgment to how you're moving. You could also, we just had a podcast with Kelly McGonigal, who's an incredible psychologist, and she wrote The Joy of Movement. And we talked about, what if you were to move your attention, zoom it way out, and look at the whole room moving as sort of like little cells of a body, and see, if you're in a yoga class, you could see the whole synchronized movement of all the arms coming up and all the arms coming down. And then there's a few that aren't going quite at the same speed, right? Just like the body, like not everything does everything at the same time. You could zoom out. What if you zoom way in and you pay attention to the sensation in your hip as you are in pigeon pose? And where is the sensation the tightest, and where it is the more diffuse? And you could play with that type of attentional flexibility so that you can choose where you place your attention. When I practiced, I started committing to doing all the arm balances that I can't do in yoga. Like I can't do very many of them. I'm like the only one there's all the arm balancers. And then there's me that's like, I can't do the arm balance, but I'm kind of sort of in the position of as if, and I practice lifting my foot up and I kind of fall. And I've been doing this, and it's quite liberating. Like I'm just practicing falling and also paying attention to that. Like this is kind of playful. So there's lots of ways you can get more attentionally flexible.
And then this is also, I do think, a good flex of the so what muscle is kind of helpful, because after you've played around with your attention and all the different things that you're seeing, if you're coming back to like, I'm the slowest one here, so what? Like, what's the consequence of it? Like, no one died of being the slowest one there. You're not getting the benefits of the activity because you're the least coordinated one there. Someone has to be, the worst dressed person there. Someone has to be the person who lifts the lightest weights. Like that has to be somebody, and it's going to be you sometimes. So what? It doesn't say anything about the quality of that movement session for you. So you can let it go.
What I heard is, if you're going to be the slowest, be the best dressed.
There you go. See, that's right. Exactly.
Right.
Leverage. It's 2025 as of this recording. Some people are listening to this in the future, which is super cool. All right. Shout out to all the Michael J. Foxes who are listening to this in the future. And right now we are absolutely immersed or even inundated with technology. It's everywhere, and we've got this. Our phone is really, I remember one of my favorite movies as a kid was Cyborg. It was like Jean-Claude Van Damme. Shout out to all those type of movies. But we merged with technology, and we really have. Most people keep this on them at all times. And we have access to basically anything we can imagine. As you mentioned, whether it's like finding a home, a mate, food, whatever the case might be. And so, but it also has become an outlet for entertainment or just pure mind-numbing brain candy. And these designers, these incredible scientists have created these apps to keep us hooked psychologically. Like we open that app. Many of us know when you mention Cal Newport, he talks about this phenomenon of the just checks. Like we just want to pick up our phone and just check. You open that app up, next thing you know, you're doom scrolling for the next 30 minutes. And so one of the reasons that people give today is that I'm stuck on my screen, right? They can tell themselves like, I got time to exercise, but if they're being honest, like I spend a lot of time scrolling and on social media or just, using my technology and with Netflix, binge watching. So I'm stuck on my screen. I struggle with tech addiction. Let's talk about this one. What can people do to address this?
Well, we went old school with this answer because, yes, it's all new, but it's also not new. We've known addiction for a long time. And there's this classic intervention with smoking. Alan Marlott, the smoking researcher, that's used a lot now with addictions, which is urge surfing and developing our capacity to be with the urge without acting on it. As simple as that, like watching the urge like it's a wave. You notice it rising, 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 rising. It gets to that peak and it will eventually come down whether you act on it or not. So one thing to start paying attention to is the automaticity with which sometimes people will just start talking about the phone and you want to go pick up your phone, right? And could you just notice that? Could you just notice the urge to pick it up without picking it up? I'll have clients in session open up their phone. And because we have like I think it was Katie that
I call it lapse.
Yeah, the lapse, right?
There's a lapse. When you open one app, close it, the next one, it's very rhythmic. I call it lapse because I was at a zoo and saw that an animal in the zoo walked the same pattern. It was just making this mindless loop. It wasn't going anywhere. And it had worn an etch into the ground. And it was the only place in its whole entire habitat that it really moved with regularity. I'm like, that feels like a phone, where you're just bumping into the same.
Right. So could you pay attention to that? What do you press first? Where does your finger go next? And could you slow it down so that you actually are maybe doing a different lap? Right. So sorry, we can do all sorts of things. We do need to engineer our phones. Like if you open up my phone, my main screen, all it has on it is settings. Because settings is the one thing I need to be able to turn off this or turn on that, like in a kind of emergency kind of situation, right? Keep the bright on, whatever. And I have to work. I've got to do a little work to get to the other ones, right? So you can engineer your phone, but we bring awareness to that. But another thing that I would love people to bring more awareness to is the differentiation between wanting and liking. So when they're looking at sort of the neuroscience of addiction, it's not just a wanting, it's also a liking. And a lot of the things that we want, we actually don't end up liking. And these are two systems in the brain. Dopamine is more the wanting system, whereas like serotonin, things that exercise gives us, is more of the liking system. What they find with phone use is that we want to get on there, but when we're on there, there's a point of diminishing returns where we no longer like it. And it feels dissatisfying. And if you can develop your awareness of that point of diminishing returns, just like you do with a piece of cake, the first 3 bites are good. And then maybe the next, like too much frosting makes you sick. Train yourself. Because I don't think we need to there's no fighting this thing at this point. It's in everything that we do, but we can be a bit more mindful, be a bit more aware, know our own system, and then choose to step out. And oftentimes the thing that we would both want to do and like to do is something like being connected, aligned with our values, moving our bodies, all those things, and pay attention to that. Does a point of diminishing returns, actually, maybe there's not a point of diminishing returns. There's a point of increased returns as you do those things. A little different. This
is awesome. It's got me thinking of a specific example, which is, someone's telling themselves they don't have time to exercise, but yet they have time to watch Real Housewives. All right. And you guys talk about this concept of temptation bundling. Talk about that.
I love temptation bundling. I've been doing it for years for cleaning. It's when you take something that you do like to do and you pair it with this other thing that you want to get done, but maybe is a little bit more tricky for you to access. So if you love Housewives, then can you pair it with movement in some way? You know, instead of sitting in your chair while watching it, can you get down on the floor and do some exercises while you watch it? Or I feel like gyms have been temptation bundling the entire time by putting the TV screen, you know, right there on the treadmill. It's this idea of fitting. It's the zucchini in the brownies, right? You know, you're trying to serving of vegetables in there, something that you like.
And the key is you're only allowed to do that thing that you like while you're moving.
Mm-hmm.
So I only listen to certain podcasts on my runs, you know? And then it's like, all of a sudden I'm looking forward to it. I call certain friends, right? I'm looking forward to it now because you're overriding some of that. I mean, it's just a mixed bag. Like there's things that are always uncomfortable, but if you can add in a little bit of joy, it makes it, you know, it's like the spoonful of sugar approach, you know, to medicine from a long time ago. There's a lot of research on temptation bundling, and that comes from Katie Bowman, who sort of designed this intervention to increase exercise. And they found, I think it increases your exercise by like 23%. So there's good research behind it. Yeah.
I remember hearing my wife say she couldn't wait to get to the Stairmaster so she could watch her show.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And for me, it's music. I don't have control over the music anymore in my house. So the fact that I can load up just whatever I want to listen to, and I'll go take a walk really just to go listen to music, but I'll, you know, be out there for 90 minutes walking fast and hard just because I like the music.
Yeah. This is so good. I want to keep talking to you both. And again, the book is so valuable. It's one of these things that, you know, that sentiment, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. This is one of those things right now, to have access to this book, addressing so many of our psychological barriers to movement. And today, again, we have a society, a culture that's set up in a way that you should not feel guilty about not moving. The culture is designed in a way that has removed it from the equation. And so we have to engage something that humans have never had to do. The concept of exercising or, you know, expending energy was something that this is a new revelation, new invention. And there are so many different fruitful solutions available for us to be able to access, because the thing is, if you're listening to this right now, especially to this point, you want to move. You want to find that joy in movement. You want to find that connection and consistency and all these things. And so the solution is going within and being able to self-assess and find out what are the things that are holding you back and having science-backed ways to address them. Is there anything else about the book that you want people to know? And also, where can people pick up a copy?
Well, I think I want to add that I think a big mission for this book is also for the people that are physicians and coaches and therapists that are regularly prescribing movement and are just giving people all the reasons why they should move. I mean, there's a little spin on that. I know I should exercise, but because someone told you that, your doctor told you that, your personal trainer told you that, your physical therapist told you that. And we want to arm those folks with some ammunition of what happens when they get a reason back. Here are some things you could do to coach your clients differently. If you're a movement coach, whatever it is, yoga instructor, that for me as a therapist, I'm prescribing movement as a mental health intervention. It's probably the most important mental health intervention that I prescribe. And I need to know all of the defenses that are going to come at me and how to work with those in a psychologically sophisticated way while not shaming someone.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I think the biggest takeaway I have for the book is maybe the first part of you that has to move is your mind. You know, like maybe that's the muscle that needs, not a muscle, but that's the first bit of flexibility and strength. And that's the first body part that you might want to play with. And if you've never approached it that way, it might be the easiest way for you to get moving.
Katie, I wouldn't even say maybe. Okay. You know it is.
I just like to leave, a little wiggle room.
little wiggle. So where can people pick up a copy?
Their local bookstore, Amazon, online. Yeah, anywhere fine books are sold.
Awesome. And where can people follow you both?
You can find me at nutritiousmovement.com and all of that too on socials.
And you can find me at Dr. Diana Hill on socials. And I have a Just Like Me meditation. If you're interested in that part of it, like how to build a little more compassion, that's a bit of my interest as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for coming and sharing your wisdom. This has been amazing. Appreciate you. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here. A meta-analysis of walking speed studies published in the Journal of the American Medical Association shows that down to the 10th of a meter per second, an older person's pace, along with their age and gender, can predict their life expectancy just as well as the complex battery of other health indicators.